Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I wanted to take a little time on this Saturday to take a look at the EU Masters. I haven't been able to watch a ton of the matches, but I've still been discussing the matches in Discord with my patrons and everybody in the League of Items community. So basically, there have been a few ways that I've approached some of these slates. I haven't done great, but a bunch of the people in Discord have been winning just because of some of the input I've been giving, and I've only been running like between 1 to 3 lineups on most days. But in the video, we're going to go over some of the scoreboards from these matches. I was going to go over EGOT, and then I was going to take a look at what the esports plug said about what he expects to happen in the upcoming matches because he's a sharp guy and he's been watching the games. So first, let's do some of the EGOT stuff. So Billy Von Elds has the LFL as the best league currently. The Ultra Liga has had a really bad tournament altogether, and I think they're all out of the tournament. So that's something to keep in mind. Those kinds of narratives are a little, those are things that I like to go against in general. So we'll see what else happens in here. So then Billy's saying that Misfits is trending upwards. Carmine Corp is the best team by a considerable margin. That's important because like especially for something like the EGOT ranking, which is like for gold over an average team, you would expect a team like Carmine Corp, who's been dominating teams in this tournament, to like for the public consensus to fall directly in line with what has been happening in these matches. So that does give you somewhat of an edge to like go against because even just by projecting them to be like the second best team on the slate, you're probably going to carve out a little bit of an edge. I just think that while Carmine Corp may be the best team, it's also possible that they've had good matchups, either stylistically or talent wise, against other teams. So that's definitely something I'd want to keep an eye out for. So, like, if I wanted to just go anti EGOT, for example, I would say downgrade, not downgrade, but make sure you're creating some lineups that have a complete fade of the LFL or reduce the positive outcomes for the LFL. Because that could just be something where they had a good group stage, but it doesn't translate much further. It's possible. So EGOT's done a very good job outside of Ultra Liga matches, which that's kind of what I was talking about in Discord at the beginning of the tournament. Is that like a Go Rogue, Kick, and those types of teams are going to be probably overrated because they played so well in the European Masters last year. But let's just move forward. So Billy is basically saying that he expects UCAM to beat MKS, which is the popular way to look at it. Carmine Corp to beat Supermassive. I know they changed their name, but it's still Supermassive or whatever. Misfits to beat BTXL. Big to beat Mouse. So that's pretty straightforward. Let's see what John had to say. Because I read something the other day. He posted his expectations. Yeah, so UCAM against KC, Misfits against Big. So that was the same as Billy Von Elds. And then he thinks that the LFL may just be the best team. The LFL might just be the best region, which again, that's exactly what most people are saying. That's not a criticism of John's opinion. That's just when everybody agrees, that's the way. Those are the people, not people. Those are the like ideas that you kind of want to go against. I think I burned my tongue. I'm not sure when. Okay, so we're in the main event. Let's go. Actually, I should probably. So it's UCAM against MKS first. All right. Still trying to get used to the office setup. So let's see how this goes. Match history. And why I'm doing this is because outside of how the games have kind of turned out, you want to be able to take a look at the team compositions they're running, what that suggests about the type of team they are, and things of that nature. So let's just do everything from this. They're missing a bunch of games here, but that's fine. So we see this might not be the easiest way to look at it. So they're getting Seraphine banned against them. I guess they place a high priority on that. I don't expect Makers to do very well. That's actually one of the teams that I was kind of picking against in the group stages. That one didn't work out for me, obviously, but there's got to be a better way to do this. Let's do this. Let's go to scoreboards. So we're looking for EUM. So EUM against Illuminar. Illuminar was another team from the Polish league. So, people with high opinions of the Polish league were probably picking Illuminar here. I think that's one of the reasons I liked EUM, because I do think I picked that in the first day of games. This is a pretty generic team composition. Nar's a champion that everyone will pick. Same. The Rakan is a little bit different, but not much different. So that doesn't change my opinion of them at all. It doesn't give them like a style that I think they're trying to adhere to. And then Makers, kind of the same thing. They do play Fasting Senna, which is interesting. And then they also played Cassiopeia, which is pretty interesting. Big was obviously the best team from this group. Then we have Makers again. This was Makers against a Greek team, so the Greek team was not very good. Pretty generic team composition. We see Moonstone Rune or Staff of Flowing Water. The Staff of Flowing Water is not really helping out Jinx very much, but this game just kind of got out of control, I'm assuming, because you have a Jinx that's 8-0 and 5. Pretty tough to lose that one. And then we have EUM again. So playing Urgot is a good thing. Thresh Jinx is good. I'm not a huge fan of Twisted Fate, but this is fine. Mako was not a team that was supposed to do very well. So I'm not really taking much away from this. It's a pretty straightforward draft. I think both teams can win that. It's not like they're severely out-drafting their enemies or anything like that. Then we have EUM against Mouse. And this one was a little bit of a surprise to people. Everybody knows the name Leader at this point. They went for a carry against carry matchup top lane, which shows they have a lot of confidence in this guy. Straightforward jungle matchup. I think this is the third different AD carry we've seen him play, so they're not prioritizing 180 carry much higher than everything else. And then again, we have a pretty straightforward team composition, but we do have an Akali, which is somewhat interesting to see. A lot of teams are playing it, but it is important to look at. So then we have Makers. Okay. Makers against Kick. Another straightforward team composition. Getting an Aphelios game is interesting. Not every team is playing that. This is a pretty good team composition going up against Big. It shows that they're not drafting poorly. And then this is pretty interesting. They went for another fasting Senna with Nico, so this is probably something they think is very strong. And even though it didn't work, they'll probably try it again. Let's see. UCAM and Makers. That's a pretty big difference. Oh, wait, did it change? Current. Yeah, so he said everything greater than 12.5 is an 18. They're 18-1, so that's pretty good. For European Masters, 68. So even before it would have been much different. That's interesting. So all I was doing here is taking a look at the differential between how they entered the EU Masters and where they are now, and this shows the differential. So this means that like a team like Misfits has performed like better than you would think they would, based on like just normal gold totals. They got slapped. They got slapped. Uh, So UCAM, another straightforward team composition. That's another game of Rakan. I think they've played that multiple times. And then they have NAR, another game of Rakan. So that's going to put stress on the draft because teams are probably going to want to ban that. And then I don't love seeing Victor, to be honest. I'm very anti-Victor personally. But they both played Victor, so I don't really give an edge to either one in terms of. I don't give an edge to either team in terms of the drafting. So let's see. If you follow eGoat, I think you go UCAM. Based on what I saw, I would also be going UCAM. That was my gut when I saw the bracket. I feel like UCAM will probably be the more aggressive team in the early game. This is interesting to me though. If UCAM prioritizes Rakan, I think that Senna compositions do well against Rakan because he's short range. Like he's highly mobile, so he can get in and out of fights. But with Senna, you're probably going to do fine in the laning phase because you're not putting that much pressure without a lot of additional attention from the jungler. So I could see myself playing a little bit of Makers as secondary stacks. I think they do have a chance to win that match. Let's see if we can get some odds. Plus 535. I think that's good. I think I'd be interested in that. And that'll be a big influence on the ownership because most people are just going to run UCAM Carmine Corp, which is reasonable. All right, so let's go to the next match. So basically, my final thoughts on that match are UCAM should be the favorite, but I think that Makers is much better than plus 535. They're how long are these series? Computer's being kind of slow. All other matches are best of 3. In a best of 3, I mean, they could definitely they could definitely win. If you get into game one and it's like a Senna composition against a Rakan composition, I could see Makers winning game one, and that puts a lot of additional pressure on UCAM to be even more aggressive in the early game to try to create an advantage. I mean, that's a spot that I think people are going to be pushed in that direction anyways because Carmine Corp is such an overwhelming favorite that I think there will be ownership on Makers regardless, just for the people who want to project an underdog to win. But I think most lineups will still be Carmine Corp plus Carmine Corp plus UCAM. So let's take a look at the other match. So Supermassive was coming out of the worst group. This was by far the worst group from a performance perspective. How did they get in? Did they win tiebreakers or something? Oh, it's because they had a better. So they lost to Rogue. Even though Rogue had a bad tournament overall, I don't think this is a big deal. And it was obviously a very close game. They were able to beat Misfits already. So if they beat Misfits, and Misfits was somewhat competitive, right? With Carmine Corp in the LFL. Schlatan. That is a good win. So I don't really care about their loss to Rogue. The win against Misfits is good, but it's not as good as people will think it is, I guess, because they're not like I think the LFL is probably overrated at this point. This is an interesting team composition. The one thing about Sup Up is they've been in the EU Masters multiple times and they just get dominated, so it's really tough to trust them. They do put a pretty high priority on Seraphine, which is fine. Seraphine was banned against them. Seraphine's banned against them. Interesting team composition. Very difficult to pull off. So this is a negative sign. Playing like a zero engage composition basically outside of the NAR. This one's a little better. They have 2 ways to engage fights. And then this is a pretty interesting team composition. I do think Sivir is pretty good right now. And then, I mean, Carmine Corp, I don't need to explain to anybody why to play Carmine Corp. They're the favorite to win the tournament at this point. But let's see if there are any, like, things that we can see in how they're drafting. Nope, they play Senna Cho'Gath. And that game, I actually did get to watch that game. That was pretty dominant. That's a very good combination. Then they run a Nocturne composition. They have Rise. They play Darius, so that's pretty good. I know Adams had a really good tournament so far. Olaf top. And that's specifically because of NAR. So when other teams are lazy against them in draft, they will punish it. They play Pike. So those are the kinds of things I really like to see from top-end teams, is that they have these other kinds of picks to respond to lazy drafting. So that's a benefit. The way that could backfire is if they give away Seraphine in game 1 because they think they have some kind of counter to it, and then they lose. So that would be a little bit concerning. And then Misfits against BTXL. So let's just move ahead. BTXL. It's a pretty generic team composition. This was interesting that Arome had that type of performance. Good for him. I don't think he's very good, but it's always interesting to see players like that kind of reemerge. Malzahar game, that was pretty interesting. I played a game of Malzahar today because I thought it would be pretty good in this meta. Not sure if it really makes that much sense against that team composition. And let's see what we can find out about Misfits. This is a good team composition. This is just a poke composition. It's difficult to pull off. It's a high. It requires a high level of execution. So that's pretty good. Fundamentally different type of team comp. They're trying to control zones with Victor and Scion so that Aphelios can kind of free fire. But at the same time, Sup-Up had a bad composition, in my opinion. Wukong, Draven, Akali. So they're not really predictable in terms of how they draft. But neither is BTXL. It should be an interesting series to watch. BTXL. I think this is oh, never mind. Wrong team. BTXL. I still don't think Arome is that good. Has had some good performances, though. But again, you're going down in competition, so maybe our expectations should be changed as well. Tough to say. I really don't think there's a huge edge. Just looking at the scoreboards for these teams, nothing really jumps out. So it seems pretty close. I think you can play BTXL without feeling too bad about it. And that fits in with the like anti-LFL narrative. You can kind of talk yourself into, I think, pretty easily for ownership reasons. Big. I think Big is a team that I think is the dark horse to win. I know they're undefeated, but everybody's just kind of a little hyped up on the LFL right now. So if I had to pick a team right now, it would probably be Big. And just assume that everyone's too focused on the LFL having a good regional performance. That's who I would be betting on, I think. And it's a good spot for them, I think, against Maus because people will recognize a lot of the names from Maus and just kind of convince themselves they have a chance to win. Good team composition. They're putting a priority on Jinx, which is pretty good. That's very interesting. Oh my god, Lisa in top. What the hell? So they were just styling on him at that point. This was also a weak group. I think this group, What was the group I was saying was the weakest before? This one? Okay, yeah. So I think Group B and Group C were definitely worse. Actually, they all look kind of weak. Like, I think Big was the only good team in this group. I don't think I don't think that I don't think that Misfits is that good. Maybe I just don't like a lot of these teams. It's possible. Leader. Hmm. I don't think that I'll be able to play much Mouse. If I did play it, it would probably be in like a double underdog lineup just to have that. Let's see. What does that say? Mouse against Big. That is a big difference. That's just at the 12% mark. That's interesting. So I would say, if I'm just doing a recap of everything, I think that the LFL is overrated right now. Whether or not they continue to have a good performance in the EU Masters, or if a team from the LFL wins it, it's kind of irrelevant. Like, you can be the best region at a tournament and not win the tournament. Like LFL, there's like some weird ass bugs in the office right now. The LFL, we had Yellow Stars team last year, right? LDLC. They had some good performances. It's not like the LFL is coming out of nowhere. So you already had a very strong region, and people are probably going to try to convince themselves that they're like by far the best region. But it is important to look at the teams themselves and how they kind of approach drafting and all that. So I think that UCAM against Makers, I think that I would consider playing Makers just because of the fact that they're that big of an underdog. And I think that if the Senna compositions are going up against Rakan compositions, that could make a lot of issues for UCAM. Especially if they lose the first game. Because if you lose the first game, they're going to think to themselves, we have to play more aggressive early on, which is going to play into Makers' hand. So like in game 2, you'd probably expect to see like a Senna Tom Kench ban, and then force them to play something less safe in the bot lane and then attack the bot lane. Carmine Corp against Sup Up. I'm not playing Sup Up at all. I would just play Carmine Corp. That would be the chalk that I'm willing to just be like, okay, that's fine with me. The problem is that Carmine plus UCAM is going to be the most popular, and then Carmine plus Makers will be second most popular. And then you'll have UCAM with Carmine Corp, and then Makers with Carmine Corp. Those are all going to be pretty easy lineups to make, and I think they'll be very popular. Yeah. And then Misfits against BTXL. I would be able to play BTXL in that matchup. And again, you can just tell yourself the LFL is good, but they're not that good. They're not going to completely dominate all the other regions here. And then Big against Mouse, I would only play Big. I think when you see things like Lee Sin top lane and all the weird picks that they're using, that speaks to their forward thinkingness, which is the kind of thing that I like in League of Legends. And like that is a sign of a strong team to me, because they don't take the meta from other people. They kind of try to figure it out for themselves. And with that being said, a lot of the times the overarching meta just isn't relevant to a lot of games, because one team is better than the other. If you pick champions like Lee Sin, and I guess you're probably playing for the laning phase for early game. So that's very interesting to me. I want to go back and watch that game, actually, just because it's so unique. especially nowadays. In a lot of these regional tournaments, you'll see a lot of teams who are just willing, they're only willing to play what's known because they don't want to make fools of themselves. So when you get a team like Big who's willing to kind of just play whatever they want and still win convincingly, um, that's that's something to watch out for. So that's basically it. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a good time watching the EU Masters. I can't wait for next season. It's going to be a great season. MSI is coming up in a couple of weeks. I'll have videos out for that as well. If you want to check out my Patreon and become a patron, then you'll get access to the Discord server where there's a lot of activity, a lot of people talking about the matches that are going on, people giving out advice, people talking and bouncing ideas off of each other. It's a really nice community, in my opinion. I think that everyone who's a part of it kind of agrees and enjoys being there. So, again, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.